Did you know that in the heart of Alaska is a town almost entirely cut off from the rest of the world? Everyone here lives in a one-block apartment building with limited amenities, such as a post office, health clinic, church, and laundromat. Only accessible by a relatively new train tunnel, this is Witter, Alaska, and today we will discover its unusual past. I'm your host Ryan Socash, and you're watching It's History. It may surprise you to learn that Wittner was not always the sleepy town that it is now. Rather, it began as a military installation during the height of the Second World War. During the years before the attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. military's construction across Alaska was met with a significant problem. As the need for supplies increased, so did the strain on the railroad traffic on the port of Seward. The distance was also an issue. Seward was almost 60 miles further south than what would later become Witter. Hence, the Alaskan command needed a solution to these issues, and fast. As such, American General Simon Buckner Jr. sought a suitable location for a hidden military installation. Once complete, this installation would ferry both troops and cargo to Anchorage and Fairbanks, as well as to other bases. It would also serve as a support if Seward's port were disturbed. Buckner's proposed headquarters had three core parts: access to an ice-free deepwater port, natural protection from airstrikes, and topography that would block enemy air surveillance. And Wittner was perfect. Its water was ice-free year-round. Its location at the head of Passage Canal was ideal. The mountains surrounding it were so impassable that the military had to blast a hole through them to link the port by railroad to Anchorage, checking off the last two must-haves of Buckner's list. Its weather was also crucial to keeping the installation hidden from enemy surveillance. Wittner gets almost 198 inches of rain annually, and it's the wettest city in all of Alaska. Not only that, but the average annual snowfall is 258 inches. Its powerful winds reach up to 80 miles per hour, and clouds almost always surround it. It also has ship access through the Prince of William Sound and Passage Canal, and can be further secured with controlled tunnel access. The man behind the tunnel operation was Anton Anderson. Anderson was originally from New Zealand, but came to the US in 1914 as a surveyor. He graduated from Seattle University with a degree in civil engineering. By 1916, Anderson had moved to Alaska, where he was crucial in developing the Alaskan Railroad. However, the Witter project was unlike anything Anderson had ever encountered before. He needed to construct two successive tunnel segments to connect the planned military facility to the Central Seaward Anchorage Railroad along a 14-mile spur. Tunnel digging had begun in 1941, and despite the extreme weather that the construction crew had to work through, temperatures often sub-zero, the project was completed a year and 6 months ahead of schedule. These results stemmed from a new sense of urgency, spurred on by the tragedy of Pearl Harbor, one that occurred not long after the commencement of construction. The tunnel was 3.5 miles when finished and was initially built to accommodate only trains. Its first train passed through on June 1, 1943, and its first shipload of troops arrived a week later. This was the first use of the tunnel in the Northeast base. At the time, it was one of the longest highway tunnels in North America, and with that, it became a crucial transport hub for the U.S. military defenses. The site was initially named Camp Sullivan. It wasn't until after the war that it was renamed Whittier, after the 19th century American poet John Greenland Whittier. Its accommodations included buildings such as barracks, a mess hall, a theater, and a chapel made primarily of wood. The 714th Railway Operating Bastion oversaw the infrastructure that serviced the railroad and port. At the time, Witter sheltered over 1,200 personnel and was kept a heavily protected secret during the high-stakes wartime. No civilians were permitted to enter, and any railroad photography was classified. The settlement was monitored very closely to ensure no words of Witter would get out to the wider world. This secrecy paid off, though, as Alaskans' Aleutian Islands were later raided by Japan. The attack never reached Witter, which remained secure. As World War II ended, it seemed that Wittner too had reached its expiration in a sense. While it had been crucial in times of war, there was little need for a town like this in a time of peace. That was until the Cold War came about and caused a second boom in Whittier's development, as it was decided that the garrison was needed more than ever before. It was intended to house over 1,000 Army personnel in a, quote, city under one roof, the Buckner Building, built between 1949 and 1953 and named for Simon Buckner Jr., was the answer to this plan. It incorporated almost 300,000 square feet over 6 floors, and at one point was the largest building in all of Alaska. According to Atlas Obscura, this building included a hospital, a 320-seat theater, a 4-lane bowling alley, a 6-cell jail, a barbershop, a church, a bakery, a library, a radio station, a photo lab, a rifle range, a commissary, a cafeteria, and kitchen. Plus, there was an officer's lounge and accommodation for soldiers and their families. It was built to support and house the military personnel to ensure they wouldn't have to leave and expose themselves to enemy surveillance. In 1957, it was accompanied by the 14-story Hodge Building. The Hodge Building would later be renamed the Baggage Towers and was the lone survivor between the two after the Buckner fell into disrepair. And it may surprise you that these two behemoths were planned to be the first of 10 buildings. At its dedication, the Hodge Building was considered the most expensive military construction project besides the Pentagon. At the time of its opening, the Hodge Building was given the lofty title, quote, the Wilderness Skyscraper. However, as the tides of the Cold War shifted, so too did Whittier's military relevancy. In 1960, military forces started pulling out, though that wasn't the only major event in Whittier's history. You see, not long after, tragedy struck. The biggest earthquake in Alaskan history struck on March the 27th, 1964. The earthquake's epicenter, measuring 9.2 on the Richter scale, was just 33 miles away from Witter, though the after effects and the 3 tsunamis caused by it caused most of the devastation. By the time the destruction was over, it had claimed the lives of 13 people and generated over $5 million worth of damages. The waterfront and port facilities were left inoperable, and many buildings were damaged, including the Hodge and Buckner buildings. A monument was erected in 2020 to commemorate those who tragically lost their lives. So where do the buildings of Wittner stand today? Well, as stated before, Buckner Tower was abandoned during the earthquake of Alaska. The building was later purchased in 1972 by the city of Wittner, but no developer was found for the property, hence it changed hands multiple times, hoping to one day be renovated, though those hopes were sadly never fulfilled. It was continually delayed by factors such as a lack of financing, not to mention the lack of a decent road to the town. As such, it is a shadow of what it once was. This once magnificent structure is now covered in graffiti and asbestos, mold, and mildew. Or perhaps best put in the words of History.net, which quotes, "The building is too expensive to renovate, but too historic to pull down, slowly crumbling back into the mountains from which it was constructed. The building went into foreclosure in 2016 and was repossessed by the city. The city of Wittner still hopes to restore it and preserve its history. However, the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation recommends the opposite, that it's not feasible to fix and should be torn down. The result is that the Buckner building is caught in limbo, too expensive to restore or tear down. Baggage Towers, on the other hand, had a much brighter future. It was transferred to civilian owners in 1973 and was updated for modern usage. It became a building that now houses most of Whittier's permanent residents, standing strong against the rain, snow, and wind. Its many hallways serve as streets to the residents, and some claim that several residents have not left the building in weeks, months, or even years. Its accommodations include condominiums, rental units, a church, a pharmacy, a clinic, a gym, a police department, a mini market, and city offices. Now, although the abandoned tower and the inhabited one seem like two separate entities, they are in fact connected by utility, and this has caused some major issues. You see, a pair of active boilers were housed in the abandoned structure, yet served the main building, and as the property decayed, so did the vital utility, leaving the town with only one functional boiler, which experienced daily issues. And this was no joke, as under the threat of harsh Alaskan winters, residents were uncertain of their future, as if the boiler stopped moving hot water through the pipes, they'd burst. What's more, the metal inflow and outflow pipes were becoming blocked by calcium and iron, and the sewage system was getting closer and closer to failure every day. The harsh winds drove rain into the cinder blocks of the exterior, causing window frames to deteriorate and leak. Thankfully, the U.S. Department of Agriculture approved a $3 million grant in September of 2015, and restorations were underway to keep the towers livable for its residents in the foreseeable future. Though Witter was only accessible by train or boat in 2000, the central segment of the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel was upgraded to accommodate road vehicles in a single-lane directional flow. As such, the tunnel remains among the longest railroad highway tunnels in North America at 2.7 miles long. This new point of access then put Whittier on the map for more and more people, leading directly to a flow of tourists to the unique town thanks to its location and history. The tunnel, however, is as unique as the town. Cars can only cross once an hour in either direction, and the tunnel closes entirely after 10:30 p.m. It's not uncommon to see residents who missed the last crossing in their cars waiting until the next day to come home. And even less unusual is for residents here to wear shirts reading POW, Prisoners of Whittier. The summer is by far the town's busiest season, as it's known among tourists for its kayaking waters and cruises into Prince William Sound. It can see up to 1,000 boats in town, but in the winter, most tourist businesses shut down as the crowds clear out. And that'll do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, this is Ryan Sokash, signing off.